All right, so today we are going to take a deep dive into a topic that I think everyone can relate to in one way or another, relationships
Hmm?
and the journeys that we all kind of go through to figure ourselves out.
Ooh. Yeah, yeah, that sounds fascinating. I'm in.
So have you ever, like, when you look back at your past relationships and you start noticing these recurring themes or patterns?
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing how those patterns emerge when you take a step back and really look.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So we're going to explore all that through this really interesting personal essay written by a man named Balázs Vendler.
Okay.
And he's actually really honest about dissecting his own relationship history.
I love when people are able to do that.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage, right?
Yeah, and I think we can all learn a lot from hearing about other people's experiences, especially when they're so open and vulnerable. So the author starts by describing this tendency he had to be drawn to talented women who, for different reasons, weren't quite living up to their full potential. It's like he saw something in them that maybe they didn't even see in themselves.
Hmm. That's interesting right from the start. It makes you wonder if he was like subconsciously attracted to that dynamic,
Yeah.
like maybe seeking to sort of fix or complete them in some way.
Exactly. And he actually kind of owns up to that. He even says, "Well, I'll help."
Oh, wow.
Almost like it was a mission for him, which got me thinking about those classic romantic tropes of the knight in shining armor
Right. Yeah.
coming to save the damsel in distress,
Yeah.
which we see all the time.
Oh, absolutely. It's like embedded in our cultural narratives, isn't it?
Totally.
About masculinity and femininity and the
Yeah.
whole idea that men are supposed to be the protectors and providers.
And then to make things even more interesting, he links this tendency back to his relationship with his mother, who he felt also had unrealized potential.
Interesting. The mother connection. So often that's a key part of the story.
Right. So he says, I'm going to quote here, "My mother, who was talented in her profession, one of the best students in the country.
Wow.
But life, and perhaps her own fears, didn't allow her to become who she wanted to be. And as a child, I couldn't help her. So I'll help the woman who's beside me, who's my partner. After all, that's a man's job."
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. You've got the mother connection, which
Hmm.
often reveals a lot about, our attachment styles and the kinds of dynamics we recreate in our adult relationships. And then that phrase,
Yeah.
that's a man's job.
Right.
It just suggests that maybe he internalized certain societal expectations about how men are supposed to behave.
Like it's almost as if he was trying to like rewrite his past
Mm.
by saving these women, like he was trying to achieve something he couldn't as a child, which I think adds another layer of complexity.
Absolutely. And it raises the question,
Yeah,
what does it really mean to help someone?
that's the question, isn't it?
Like, is it about offering solutions or is it more about creating space for them to discover their own path?
Right, which he definitely seems to be grappling with as the essay goes on, because he describes how he would try to guide his partners,
Familiar.
offer advice,
Mhm.
even push them in certain
Oh,
directions.
I've been there.
Yeah.
It's so tempting to do that.
Yeah. He says, "I think you should do it this way or that. Take risks, organize, get it done."
That's the instinct, right? To jump in and fix things.
Yeah, but does it work?
Well, speaking from experience, it often backfires.
Yeah, and that's what happens to Balaz, too. He realizes that his attempts to help were actually creating distance and
Mhm.
resentment in his relationships.
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah,
Sometimes our efforts to control or rescue someone actually end up stifling their growth.
mm.
I think true support often requires us to kind of like let go,
Right.
trust that our partners are capable of navigating their own challenges.
Which is so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of self-awareness
Oh, absolutely.
and humility to step back and realize that we're not always the best judges of what's right for someone else.
100%. It's definitely a journey. And in Balaz's case, his journey continues with a period of like deep introspection.
Mm,
A time of solitude in 2021 where he finally asks himself the question,
the big question.
so what should I do?
And that's where we're going to leave off for now. We've established the patterns, the motivations, and now the big question.
I'm hooked. I can't wait to see where he goes from here.
So stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive where we'll explore Balaz's evolving perspective and whether he actually manages to break free from those old patterns.
Can't wait.
Okay, so we left off with Balaz kind of facing this crossroads, right?
Yeah.
Like, does he continue with those same old relationship patterns or does he try something completely new? I'm curious what you think he ended up choosing.
Well, I mean, Knowing how much self-reflection he's already done, I have a feeling he wouldn't just, revert back to his old ways.
Right.
I think he's looking for something deeper.
Right. You're so right. And he actually frames it, this decision in such a beautiful way. He asks himself, should I say no to something my instincts scream yes to?
Wow, that's powerful. It's like he's wrestling with that pull,
Yeah.
that desire for connection,
Mm-hmm.
but also recognizing that he needs to change his approach.
Yeah, and that tension, I think that's something we can all probably relate to in some way, right?
Absolutely. That wanting love, but also knowing you need to grow and evolve.
Mm-hmm. And I love how he sums up his kind of new perspective, He says, I think I need to say yes if that's what comes from deep within my heart, and I have only one job: to understand how I can be the man beside a woman who can be who she wants to be because she dares to be who she wants to be.
Wow. He's not talking about
Okay.
fixing her or changing her anymore.
Yeah.
It's about supporting her on her own journey.
Yeah, it's a complete 180 from his previous approach. And he actually uses this really striking analogy to kind of illustrate that change.
Oh, I love a good analogy. Lay it on me.
Okay, so imagine like a hurdle race, right?
Okay, I got it.
And you see your partner struggling, hitting obstacles, maybe even falling. I think our first instinct is to like shout warnings.
Oh, totally. Like, watch out, there's a hurdle.
Right. But is that actually helpful?
Now that you mention it, probably not.
And Balázs, he comes to the same realization. He says, when I see my partner running into the hurdles of life, hitting herself, maybe falling into the mud, wiping off the dirt in frustration, I don't need to shout, hurdle. Don't you see? She sees it, and it hurts.
It's like rubbing salt in the wound, isn't it?
Right. So instead of shouting warnings, he focuses on just being present.
Okay, like that. Yeah.
Simply being there for her. He says, so I just help her up, maybe dust her off, or maybe just hug her, hold her hand, or look into her eyes from a little distance so she feels it's okay. She can try again when she feels it's time.
That's beautiful. It's like he's finally understanding what true support really means.
Yeah, it's not about taking over or giving unsolicited advice.
Well-
It's about creating that safe space where she can, stumble and learn and get back up on her own.
And everyone has their own pace, right?
Yeah.
Their own way of approaching those hurdles.
Exactly. And he acknowledges that too. He says, so maybe it's enough just to be there beside her, to love, to give security, emotionally, financially, whatever is possible. Or just try to understand what she's going through and reassure her. It's all right, because after so many bumps against the wall, it's already a huge thing to try again, regardless of whether the next hurdle is successfully cleared.
It's about celebrating the effort, even if they don't always succeed.
Right, and this whole shift in his perspective, it seems to have a huge impact on his relationships.
Yeah, tell me more.
And we see this most clearly in his relationship with Kaida, his current partner.
Oh, right. He mentioned her earlier, didn't he?
Yeah, and if you remember, he described her as ambitious and talented, but what's different this time is his approach. He's not trying to mold her or push her in a certain direction. He just says, I'm learning how to be beside her as a husband, as a business partner, as support.
That's a big lesson for everyone listening.
Isn't it?
Like, how do we support our partner's growth?
Yeah.
Without imposing our own expectations or trying to control everything.
Right. And he seems to be figuring it out. He observes Kaida as she, step by step in our everyday life, realizes herself. And with that, she gets a little closer to who she truly is. And it's like he finds joy just in watching her grow.
There's something so beautiful about that, just letting someone blossom into who they're meant to be.
Totally. And it all leads up to this last line of the essay, which I thought was so perfect in its simplicity.
Ooh, give it to me.
He just says, becoming a good partner.
Wow. So much packed into those 3 words. It's a journey, not a destination.
Right. It's not about being perfect. It's about constantly growing and learning and adapting.
And that's something we can all strive for, no matter what our relationship status.
Totally. And it leaves us with so much to think about. What does it actually mean to be a good partner? Is there like a universal definition, or is it something we each define for ourselves?
That's a great question, and I think Balázs gives us a really good starting point by sharing his own evolution.
Yeah.
It encourages us to examine our own patterns, our motivations, and how we define support in our relationships.
I don't know about you, but that ending, becoming a good partner, it really got me thinking.
Oh yeah, me too. It's like, it's such a simple statement, but it's got so much depth to it.
Right. Like, what does that actually mean in practice? You know,
Mhm.
what does it actually look like to be a good partner?
Exactly. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it. It's not like a one size fits all kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's more like an invitation to like explore what being good means within our own like unique relationships.
totally. And you know what else really stood out to me throughout the essay? It was how much of his journey was actually about self-discovery.
Oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
wasn't just about him figuring out how to be a better partner.
Right.
It was about him like really understanding himself, you know,
Mhm.
his own patterns, his motivations, even going back to his childhood experiences.
Yeah, it's like he had to do all that inner work
Mm.
before he could actually show up as a more supportive partner.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mm. Not like that.
You know, we can't truly support others if we haven't taken the time to take care of ourselves first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if sometimes we approach relationships with this idea of like finding someone to complete us
Mm.
instead of seeing them as like individuals on their own paths, you know?
Oh, that's such a classic trap, right? The whole finding the one
Mhm.
who will magically make everything perfect.
Right. But in reality, relationships are about two whole people
Exactly.
coming
And
together.
with all their baggage.
Yeah, and it's messy and complicated and there's no magic wand.
And that's okay. That's what makes it real.
Yeah. And that requires us to kind of like relinquish control, doesn't it? To accept that we can't like dictate our partner's journey.
100%. True support is about giving them the space to grow and evolve in their own way,
Right, even if it takes them in directions that we might not have expected.
even if it's hard to watch sometimes.
Yeah, so if we move away from this idea of like fixing or completing each other,
Mm-hmm.
then what does it actually look like? Like what are the qualities of a good partner? What are the things we should be focusing on?
Well, for me, I think empathy is huge, you know,
Mhm.
being able to truly understand your partner's perspective,
Yeah.
even if you don't always agree with them.
Yeah, and that kind of goes hand in hand with active listening, right? Like
Yeah.
really being present when your partner is talking.
Totally. It's not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Yeah.
It's about making them feel heard, understood, and supported.
And trust is a big one too, isn't it? Like that feeling of safety and security to be vulnerable with each other.
Oh, absolutely. Knowing you can share your fears and your insecurities without being judged.
Yeah. And trust goes both ways, right?
Right.
It's about believing in your partner, supporting their decisions, even when you might not be totally on board.
It's about being a team, you know,
Yeah.
working together through the ups and downs.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's less about those grand gestures and more about those everyday acts of kindness and understanding.
Exactly. It's about showing up consistently,
Yeah.
being present, both in the big moments and the little ones.
Being their cheerleader.
Their safe harbor.
I don't know about you, but this whole conversation has been so eye-opening.
Me too. It's given me a lot to think about.
Yeah, Balaz's essay has really made us like reevaluate how we approach relationships, you know, and what it means to truly be there for someone.
And I love how he leaves us with that open-ended question, becoming a good partner. It's like a reminder that it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
We're always evolving, always learning.
So true. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, we want to leave you with one final thought. What does becoming a good partner mean to you? What qualities, actions, or intentions are you bringing to your relationships? It's a question worth pondering, discussing with your loved ones, and most importantly, putting into practice. Until next time, keep diving deep.